Hey everybody, and welcome to lesson 6 of our Fusion 360 tutorials. Last time we started on solid modeling and we got all the way up to circular pattern, I believe. So for now, we're going to start working on Loft, Sweep, and Coil. These are some more advanced tools for working. Some of them can be kind of hard to understand how they work at first, but it's kind of like you just have to do it a couple times and then it'll start to make sense, okay? So, just as a brief overview, Loft, essentially what you're doing is if you have two different geometrical shapes that are parallel to one another. So, if you have two different two-dimensional shapes that are parallel but offset by some distance, imagine you are like holding two pieces of paper parallel, but they're offset by some distance. Essentially, what it's going to do is those two shapes that are offset by that distance, it's going to connect them with a solid. Okay. So this is really good for making stuff that's tapered. So if you have a shape and you want to give it a taper, Loft is a really good option to do that. Sweep is if you have a two-dimensional object and then a line that runs perpendicular to that, it'll take that profile and sweep it along a path. So you can get some really complex organic geometry with that. And then coil is exactly what it sounds like. It's used to make coils and springs. You can take pretty much any geometry and make it a coil. And this is really useful for if you want to simulate screws or like curly slide, stuff like that. Okay. So first, let's start on our Loft tool. We're going to create a work plane that is 6 inches offset from the main XY plane or whatever plane we end up choosing. On our main plane, we're going to create a circle that's 4 inches in diameter. And then on our offset plane, the one that's 6 inches away, parallel to it, we're going to make a new circle with the same center point as the previous one, but it is 5 inches in diameter rather than 4. And then we're going to use the Loft tool to make a tapered cylinder or a lofted cylinder. Okay. If that sounds confusing right now, don't worry about it. I will show you what's going on here in a second. All right. So in our data panel, we're just going to make sure that we are in the intro to Fusion and then the Fusion intro checklist folder where all of our stuff is. Last time we left off with the circular 3D pattern. So now we're going to start working on Loft. So I'm going to make a new sketch. And here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my main circle that is 4 inches in diameter. I guess I should probably swap this. This should probably go first. Okay. First, we're going to make a 4-inch diameter circle. We're going to do that right on the origin. So I'm going to use my circle tool. And inside of my sketch, starting at the origin, I'm going to draw a circle. And before I place it down, I'm just going to press the number 4 and then press enter. So now I automatically have a circle that's 4 inches in diameter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press OK. I'm going to press finish sketch. And you'll see I have a 2-dimensional circle right here. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make something called a work plane. Work plane is, you'll notice when you go to start a new sketch, see how these orange planes pop up? Those are our base planes of 3-dimensional space. But if we want to create a different plane in a different location, we're going to use something called a work plane. So under the Construct tab in the top right of our toolbar, we're going to click on the first option, and that's called Offset Plane, and it's going to ask us where we want our offset to be parallel to. So now we want our offset plane to be parallel to this circle that we just drew. So I'm going to select the plane that the circle is drawn on. So now when I click on that, nothing happens because our offset is just currently 0 inches. But this needs to be offset by 6 inches. So I can just type in the number 6 and then press enter. And now you'll see that I have a 2-dimensional circle and I've got this plane all the way over here. Okay, that is my 6-inch offset plane. So now my next step is to, on the offset plane, line up a new circle with the same center point of the previous one and create a new circle that's 5 inches in diameter instead of 4. So I'm going to start a new sketch, but instead of choosing the circle or any of these origin planes, I'm going to pick that work plane that we just created. I'm going to press OK, and you'll see this circle lined up. And right now it looks as if we're in sketch mode for this circle. But if I do Shift middle mouse button and rotate the camera, you can actually see that this work plane is offset by 6 inches from the circle here. Okay. So I'm just going to use my cube to line myself up. And I'm going to use my circle tool, starting at the same exact center point, my origin. I'm going to make a circle that's 5 inches in diameter. Then I'm going to press OK, finish my sketch. And if I rotate my camera, you'll see I now have two circles that are 6 inches offset from one another, but they share the same axis. Okay. If you're drawing this and your circle center points, if you can't get them to line up, just call me over and I will show you how to use project geometry to get that to line up. Okay. So now that we have our two geometric features, we're going to use the Loft tool. And essentially what the Loft tool is going to do is it's going to connect this circle to that circle with a solid. And we're going to get a tapered edge here. So under the Create tab, we're going to go to the Loft option. And it's going to ask us what our two profiles are. So I'm going to pick one circle and then another circle. And you'll see it'll autofill with solid, and then we're just going to press OK. And now we have a lofted circle. Now, loft is very, very finicky. If you don't do it exactly the way that Fusion wants you to do it, you'll definitely run into some problems. And it takes a little bit of experimenting to figure out what works and what doesn't, what should be a loft, what should be a sweep, that kind of stuff. So we'll get there as we keep going, but that's the basic of the Loft tool. Okay, so I'm going to press save. I'm going to call this Loft and then save. Okay. So now going back to our checklist, we're going to move on to our next one. Our next one is sweep. We're going to draw a circle that directly intersects the y-axis of the plane you sketch it on. You'll see what I mean there in a moment. You're going to start a sketch on a perpendicular plane to the circle and draw a line starting from the center point of the circle, and then use sweep to sweep the profile along the line. So I'm going to start a new design, get rid of my old one. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a sketch here. And what I mean by doing it on the y-axis, well, I guess in this case, if we look at the top right at our cube, this is technically going to be the z-axis, but that's okay. Um, Using my circle tool, I'm just going to hover over the origin so that way when I move my mouse up, see those blue dashed lines? That means I'm lined up with my center point here. Sometimes if you don't automatically reference the center point, if you just like hover your mouse over here, it won't automatically line up. So just hover over this and then move your mouse up. And then I'm going to click and click. I don't think this circle is a specified size. Yeah, it's not. So I'm just going to draw a circle that directly lines up with this line. Okay, you'll see why that's important in a minute. And then I'm going to finish my sketch. And I've just got my circle floating in space here. Now I'm going to start a new sketch, and you'll see my three-dimensional planes. The sketch we want to start is going to be this plane right here. So I'm going to select this plane because this is the one that's directly intersecting or bisecting this circle. So if I move my camera here, you'll see this plane splits this circle right down the middle. And that's exactly what we want to make this work. If you try to use this tool later on, you have to make sure you have this isn't a default origin plane. If you ever want to use sweep again, you have to make sure that you have a perpendicular plane. You'll often have to use a work plane, and it can be kind of a pain, but it works pretty well. All right, so you'll also notice there's a little white dot right here that denotes the center point of my circle. That's what, when we start drawing a line, that's what we want to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my spline tool and I'm going to, it's not hooking up. So first, okay, ignore the spline tool for a second. We have to reference this center point right here. So I'm going to go to create, project / include, and then project. And I want to project this center point right here. So I click on that and then press OK. And you'll see it turn purple. That means that we're now referencing that point on our sketch. That's exactly what we want. Sometimes it won't line up automatically. Sometimes you have to use the project tool to make sure that you're able to reference it in your sketch. So now I'm going to select my spline tool. And if I hover over this, you'll see it locks in place. So clicking on the center point of that circle, I'm just going to make like a little wavy pattern here, nothing too intense. Okay. And then finish my sketch. And you'll see now I've got a circle, and then perpendicularly coming out of that center point, we have this wavy line here. Okay. So now what the sweep tool is going to do, the sweep tool is going to take this circle and it's going to sweep it along this profile to create a solid. And it gives us some really cool looking organic shapes. So I'm going to go create. I'm going to go sweep. And it's asking me for two things, a profile and then a path. My profile is going to be the circle. And then I'm going to hit select path, and I'm going to click on that path that we just drew, and you'll see it autofills. You can also choose how far along this path you want it to go, but this is a really good animation for showing what the sweep profile does. Is it takes this geometry and it moves it along this path. That's what the sweep tool does. Then we press OK. Now we've got this cool looking handrail type of thing. I don't know. It's just a curvy spaghetti noodle. So that's the sweep tool. So we're going to press save. And I'm going to call this sweep. Enter. And we are on to our last one. We are going to use the coil tool here. We're just going to use the coil tool to create a coil. So I'm going to go new design. And I believe, okay, I haven't used this tool in a minute. So bear with me here. Okay, no, I remember. All right. So the coil tool is really easy, and it's gotten a lot better since Inventor. Inventor using the coil tool was really difficult, but Fusion 360 has made the coil tool a lot easier to use. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to create coil, and then I'm going to select a plane that I want to be perpendicular to my coil. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle that's going to represent the diameter of my coil. So that circle I just drew, that represents my central diameter of that coil. And there's a lot of different things that you can change here. You'll see there's an arrow going up and down that changes my diameter. There's an arrow, the far out arrow represents how many revolutions per distance you want it to coil. So you can use that to join stuff together or spread it out. And then there's another arrow going in the same direction that represents the thickness of the coil. Okay. So again, the coil tool is super simple, and that's pretty much all you have to do. So this is really cool, mainly because you can just get some pretty funky designs with it. And yeah, it's pretty good to use. So that's it for the coil tool. This is just a simple overview. Coil can get a lot more complicated, but we'll focus later on that in the semester. All right. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to call it coil. And by now, you should have every file needed for this checklist. So I can come through and I can grade each assignment just by looking at your Fusion folder. Again, that's why it's imperative that you have the folder name correct and that you're naming every single individual file. So I can come through and I can look to see that you did everything properly. And that will do it for our introductory to Fusion tutorial. Now, this is not nearly everything you can do with Fusion. In fact, there's a lot more you can do, but this is just a very basic overview. And we're going to get a lot more complicated as the course progresses. So once you're done, just let me know and we'll be good to go.